Hi, welcome to another video on the My Fragrance Journey. In this one, I will be doing a bit of a 101, fragrance 101, right? So as I go through my collection and touch, something became apparent to me. There's a bit of a connection that I felt building and has built over time as I collect my fragrances, right? And it's one of those key things that make us buy the fragrances, right? So in this video, I'll be looking at bottles, why bottles matter when it comes to the selling of fragrances, right? So I've got like top 5 features here that I'll talk through, and I'll sort of, also demonstrate in a way of, how these things actually work on our deep subconscious minds as we take them in to the point where the sale is made just looking at the bottle, for example, right? So the first one here, the first feature is the distinctive shape, right? Case in point, all the lamels have this shape, right? Different colors, different designs, but the shape is always the torso, right? So it's not a lamel if it's not the torso, right? Even the pretenders, such as, for example, this fragrance world dupe, Jean Gustave Home, they've also taken it, even though it's a bit, they've done a more muscular, more defined type of torso. But when you look at this, you think Lamar, that's it, right? You just think Jean-Paul Gaultier, Lamar. So that's the beginning of that connection that you start making with the fragrance, right? That gets you to the point where you're like, you know what? I like that. I'd like to at least smell what it's all about, right? And then you even get as far as something playful like this phantom, what they call the phantom, Parker Rabanne's phantom, but I call it robot. Yeah, usually I just call it robot, but it's the phantom. That's the line of fragrances, right? This, just the look of this thing just attracts you, maybe the little boy inside calls me towards something like this. Yeah, definitely my little boy is into this. He loves seeing this and just thinks it's a nice toy, right? But just a bit of difference of the type of connection that these fragrance bottle shapes create, right? The next one, for example, if you just look, the Invictus Victory, right? This is all about winning. This is all about winning, right? And the bottle just says that, right? It's nice and solid and it looks like a trophy. This is it, right? It's about being a victor, right? Invictus, right? The next feature is the bottle design and closing of the bottle, right? And when it comes to this one, man, I love this. Magnetic. This is it. Magnetic, right? This is one of the best things about a proper high-end fragrance, right? The magnetic closing cap. Usually you also get it in regular bottle types, where there's magnets, it closes nice and snug. And then in addition to that, you sometimes get a bit of engravings inside. For example, inside this cap here, it's like an image of a bee, right? An image of a bee. Then at the top, you've got the D, 2 Ds for Dior. And then even on top of the nozzle here, you've got the 2 Ds for Dior, Christian Dior. So the cap, right? The cap also starts to create that. Based on my research and the notes I've read here, they say it's the beginning of the handshake, right? It's not just a lid, but it's a handshake, right? This feels like a handshake, I must say. So yeah. Feature number 2, the cap design and how it closes, right? Sometimes, for example, case in point, the original never has a cap. Usually just a bit of a mechanism to close it to avoid it, to prevent it from maybe spilling if it presses or falls. And yeah, so this one, the Fragrance World dupe, it's got a cap and it looks terrible. This is a bad idea. This should have just gone with, go all the way. If you're gonna imitate, just imitate 100%. But just go all the way, right? So yeah, this cap just doesn't work, right? So it's one of those things that are like, it's not necessary. It's just a plain cheap looking cap, so it doesn't really create that connection, right? And And then the next one, the next feature here is the transparency and the glass quality, right? And whenever I hear of that, transparency and glass quality, I always think of this juice here, right? This is one of the best design bottles, right? This is a, you know, value for money type of fragrance, but man, it's even the cap and everything, it's not magnetic, but it fits nicely, and it just, sometimes you forget there's a cap here, right? And yeah, it's you can see the liquid, you can just smell the liquid there, how dense it is, how brown it is, and just the shape and the feel of this bottle on your hand. It's beautiful, right? This is Bentley for Men Intense, right? So this line of fragrances has these type of bottles, and they're beautiful. This is one of the best, you know. It feels luxurious, it feels solid, it feels expensive, right? So yeah, usually the transparency, you know, of being able to see the juice, you know, starts to create a bit of a vibe, a relationship with the fragrance. And then on the other side, you'll get bottles, for example, that would be blacked out like this, which, you know, create a bit of a mystery in terms of what's in the bottle, what's inside, man. How special is it, right? How special, especially if the bottle feels solid, but you can't see what's inside. It starts to create that connection and that yearning to get closer to the fragrance, right? So yeah, so that's transparency and glass quality of the container, right? Number 4, second from last, is the sprayer performance, and this one is always the one that, you know, it's the kicker, right? So just case in point, luckily most of my fragrances here have good nozzles pressurized. So for example, just look at how well it dispenses, right? So that's what you want in a fragrance, right? You don't want it to be watery and just spill on your clothes, you know, and just make a mess, but you just want it to be released like that, very, very faint, very thin, but it just goes out there, right? So for example, that's, let me just look at this one. Similarly, right? So that's what you want, and usually that is also one of those things that catches you, right? If you're into fragrance, that starts to create that experience, you know, that, you know, well engineered atomizer that delivers even distribution of the fragrance, right? It feels premium. It should feel premium, right? When it lands on your skin, it must just, it must just sit nicely, you know. It must just not spill, and then you just see the bit of liquid dripping. You don't want that, right? So telltale signs of a great fragrance are that great atomizer, right? And then last but not least here, the labeling and the detailing of that labeling, right? Case in point here, this Bentley for Men, one of the best bottles, I'll just say Bentley for Men, how the Bentley name and emblem is just engraved on this bottle here, on the metal piece of the bottle. It's beautiful, right? This talks to proper craftsmanship, right? So things like this, just that simple bottle with the shape is it's a Invictus victory, and that V, how it just sits there, how it's solid, and how it just feels it belongs, right? And it's good quality. Example on this Dior here, how it's written, very simply written there, Sauvage, Elixir, and the branding of Dior, right? So that's the kicker, right? Minimalistic, usually embossed or engraved metal plates, like for example, case in point, this one. This is what makes a fragrance. This starts to create that, you know what, buy me, take me home type of feel if you're in a store testing some of these fragrances out, right? So yeah, now you know, right? Bottle design is just not bottle design, right? There's an intent to grab you behind some of these bottle designs, and usually the better the bottle, sometimes, you know, the halfway to the sales the fragrance house is, right? So yeah, with that said, please like, subscribe. Till the next video, peace, over and out.